This is an interview with Harry Armytage. He's a longtime Subud member, helper, worked on different committees, and author of a book called Subud Survival Guide. Is that correct?
Yeah, beautiful.
Okay, sounds good. I usually start by asking how you found and came into Subud.
I came in through my father. His best friend was in England and joined Subud in the late 50s and suggested it would be great for my father to join, which he did, and then his friend dropped out. Then my mum joined and I was in a Subud family. I never had to search. It just fell in my lap. When I was 17 3/4, I got open.
And how was the opening for you?
It was just normal. I think that for many of us who are second generation, we get opened along the way in the family. And when you get opened, formally, it's just like a rubber stamp. Well, what's different?
And what year was this?
This would have been 1968.
58. Okay.
So it was in the first, it was in one of the first Subud houses. Sorry. And when everybody was madly trying to get their Subud houses, our Subud house was divisive and Bappa told us to sell it. So we sold it.
This was Subud House in Australia?
Melbourne.
Melbourne.
Called Alma Road.
And was that a good decision to sell it?
It was a necessary decision to rebuild harmony in the group. Without harmony in a group, you've got nothing.
So have you been around Bapak very many times?
Yeah, quite a few times, because living in Australia, we were close to Java. He came to Australia many times, and I went to China quite a few times. I did a Ramadan there. I worked in Java and stayed there as well. I went to a zone conference, the zone coordinator. So yeah, I had the privilege of seeing Bapa, doing sungkum to him, but I never saw him in his real power like some people glimpsed. I just saw him as an ordinary man. But I sure missed him when he left. He had that umbrella, that protective umbrella got removed. And wow, I noticed the difference then.
Do you have any kind of interesting experiences related to Bapak?
Not really. I experienced very strong Lady Handsome testing when we were in sessions with him. I guess the only personal story I've got, Papa, is that after I organised a visit in Melbourne one time, we were cleaning up afterwards, and it was hard, mundane work, cleaning up after Papa's left. And I got sweaty and dirty. And I went into the nearest shower I could think of and had this shower. And it was the most amazing shower I've had in my life. It was like I was cleansed in a way that I'd never experienced before or since. And I got out of the shower and dried off, got dressed, and then I realized where I had the shower was the shower that Papa had used. So that was, a serendipity. Nothing I looked for, it just happened.
How about just normal experiences from doing the Latihan? Do you have anything worth mentioning there?
Well, when the Latihan is really alive in me, it's like a cool breeze flows from the top of my head through my body and out the soles of my feet. And when I was with Papa, that feeling was the strongest. And it was just a wonderful feeling of just being in flow.
Yeah. So you mentioned that you had written the book, uh,
Yeah.
Subud
I was a national,
Survival Guide. Yeah.
yeah, I was a national helper in Australia, and we used to go around as national helpers do and visit all the groups. And for me, the highlight of those visits were when we always got the youth to sit in a circle and we'd listen to their questions. And after a couple of visits, I realized that two things. Firstly, the questions were repeating. And secondly, many of the questions were from second generation kids. So children who'd been born in Subud families. And it was quite clear from their questions that they weren't getting any information from their parents about the Lotan or about Subud or about why they disappeared on Monday and Thursday. So I bought a notebook and I started writing these questions down. And I filled up a couple of notebooks. When they were full, I thought, what am I going to do with this? Well, it came to me, I better go through Bapa's talks and try and find some decent answers. So I was working in the Northern Territory at that time, and I was working for the government. And I started writing the book, and it engulfed me. My days and nights were just around reading Papa talks, putting tags in, writing on the tag what the topic would be. And it kind of spilled over into work because I wasn't very busy at work. In fact, that was an understatement. I had very little to do. And I felt guilty. You know, I was being paid well to do a government job, but I was increasingly working on this book. So I tested, is it right to work on this book while I'm working for the government? And I got, yes, it is. So I followed that. I had the best printer, high-speed photocopier just next to my desk so I could print out versions. And I worked 8 hours at work, went home, worked 8 hours at home. That left me a little bit of time for sleep, the family, and eating. And I did that for 5 months. When I'd assembled my final draft and I sent it to the publisher, that week, the photocopier was moved away from my desk to the furthest point on the floor. My boss walked up to me and said, Harry, you've been so busy. I've advertised for you to have an assistant. And during that 5 months, I was not invited to any meeting. It was like I was invisible. And from that moment on, I got invited to everything. So it was a very strong experience. And it was wonderful. And I felt I used to get up at 3 or 4 in the morning, something I've never done before or since, except during the fast. And I just felt this flow, felt this enormous flow. It wasn't hard work. It was really easy work. You know, I was given a grace to do it.
What in the book to you stands out in terms of ideas?
Well, I think the biggest thing is receive your own reality. Papa always said this. He said, no, this is what I've received in all his talks, but check it yourself. Find your own reality. Find a couple of good mates and check it yourself. And of course, that doesn't, I mean, the other thing is the cover. The cover, which I ran a competition for the cover with amongst about half a dozen Subud artists. And this best encapsulated my experience of the Subud life, which is we're walking on a tightrope. We're in the material world, we have to master that. And we also want to keep in touch with the spiritual world. We have to keep a foot in both worlds. Otherwise, things happen.
Yeah. So do you feel that Subud has been a positive influence in your life?
It's been my rudder, it's been my compass. Without it, I would be lost. It's been the most wonderful thing. It's such a blessing. It makes life so simple. I mean, I did a wellness leadership course for about 2 years, about 6 or 7 years ago. And there were whole sections of that I didn't need to do any work on because I'd had the latter end, because I'd understood what suited me, what didn't, without using the frontal cortex. And I understood what the feeling was when you do something that suits your nature and you have the flow, and when you're trying to do something and it's not suitable for you and it's really hard. You need to find somebody else to do that, like doing my annual tax return. It's not one of my talents. Employ somebody else to do what you find difficult and do what you enjoy, do what you find easy. I learned that lesson really early on in life when I went to university, and I only picked subjects that I enjoyed. A lot of my friends picked subjects they thought would be useful, but because I picked the subjects that were easy to me and which I enjoyed, I got incredibly good marks. And that stood me in good stead. I then found good jobs. So never do accounting because you think it's going to earn you money. If you can't balance, waste the time.
You seem to live in a beautiful area. I saw some of your pictures.
Yeah. I lived in Canberra while I was working as a therapist, and then we moved to the Gold Coast, which is probably equivalent to Florida climatically where you are. It's subtropical. We get koalas in the garden. It's well, this time of the year we get 30 degrees Celsius. We never get any frosts. So yeah, we got a strong Subud group here. So that's the big magnet for us.
So 30 degrees Celsius would be what in Fahrenheit? Because a lot of us don't use the.
I can't understand it. I can't understand it.
Yeah.
When are you gonna change?
It doesn't look like anytime soon.
I remember the first year I was here, Australia switched to decimal currency and the metric system. And they employed, I don't know how many people, thousands and thousands of people overnight to change all the road signs from miles an hour to kilometers an hour. Yeah.
We've yet to do that.
Well, I love the metric. If you think of a liter of water weighs a kilo. There's a whole lot of really simple things.
Yeah. So have you done much testing, receiving about things in your life that to give you direction?
Yeah, absolutely. If it's something that seems difficult to make a decision with my heart and mind, then I'll usually test it. Unless it's strictly a material thing, then I won't. I'll make a decision about material things with my heart and mind. And as a helper, there is one thing I refuse to test with members, and that is whether they should marry anybody. And the reason for that is that I figure that if you're not clear enough in your heart about who you want to be your partner, then I'm not going to be a party to testing, because we may end up, we can only approach the truth with testing. I don't want to muck up your life by, you need to sort out your heart.
Yeah. How about yeah, go ahead.
So to answer that question in a contemporary sense, we're going to have a meeting to decide on a new chairman, and I will probably test about whether I should put myself up for that position before the meeting.
And do you test firsthand to see if it's right for you?
Yeah, look, I'll probably test with my dear wife. Okay. We've been doing the lady hand for many decades, and I was brought up in Melbourne, and that's where Papa's grandson moved to, and there was a lot more flexibility about some of the rules that existed in other places. So one of the interesting things that I did in researching the talks for my book was looking at whether men and women should test together, husband and wife. And in the early talks, Papa said, yes, that was okay. And then he changed his position and said, it's better off probably for most of you not to do that. And reading between the lines, I think the reason for that is because in many cases, the women, because they're less in this material world and they have to child rear and then nurture the home, their lady hands are stronger and they develop faster in the lady hand. And so some of the men were getting upset because their wives were receiving better than they were. But I've always found it a very useful thing to be able to check in with my wife.
How about your committee life? How has that worked out for you?
Well, it was good. I mean, again, it's important for me not to want the position, but to be open to serving in the position. And with that attitude, I found the committee experience has been really wonderful. I mean, if you become a chair and you've got no experience about managing a small group and managing meetings, well, you acquire that skill. And because it involves following the lady hand in that committee, you get given a grace. You get given a grace with every Subud job, and you outperform what your capacity is if you're in the right place in a Subud job, and that's a really nice experience. It's confusing if you think it's you, because it's often not. You're given the extra juice, and then you can achieve what would otherwise be unachievable, and that's pretty cool. So when I was a chairman in Melbourne, we put up a couple of halls. We hadn't got council approval for it. So my job was to get that council approval, which we did. We had to build a toilet block and we got it all legal. I think my favourite committee job was committee councillor, where you travel around the zone and you meet lots of other groups, you meet other cultures, you see how Subud operates in other cultures, and that's a wonderful, wonderful education. It broadens the mind, and it's really humbling to come across groups where they're much less powerfully endowed materially, but their lady hand is much stronger than it is in the West. Little villages in Indonesia with a lady hand, it's just so powerful.
How about your family life?
I worked as a therapist for 20 years, and I worked with, by way of answering a question, and I worked with bright and gifted kids with learning difficulties, and most of those difficulties had their genesis in childhood trauma, and a lot of that childhood trauma was around conflict in marriage, divorce, violence in marriage, rape, and so on. And as I would say to my clients who were my mums, I'd say to them, you know, the most important thing, one of the most important decisions you can make in life is who you choose to have babies with. And I was lucky enough to pick the most wonderful partner for my life. And we've had an easy marriage. And of course, it hasn't been without its difficulties. Every marriage is like two bits of sandpaper rubbing together till you're both smooth. And over the years, that happens. You learn how to avoid, or we've learned how to avoid those gut-wrenching arguments that we had early on in our marriage. Just don't do it anymore. So we've been blessed. We've got 2 boys and a girl, and we've got 4 grandsons. And we have a strong family. I have 2 brothers and a sister, and we all love each other. We get on well together. We hang out together. very lucky.
So has Subud helped in dealing with your marriage situation or family situation?
Yeah, I definitely in our marriage, definitely. We're both in Subud. We've been long time members, and yeah, if we hit a difficulty, we go to the heart and mind won't sort it out. Go to the lady, always. It's just such a simple solution, and I really don't like going to bed with something unresolved. I like to kind of resolve it before we get to bed, and then we get a good night's sleep, wake up happy.
Yeah. Good plan.
Yeah. Like most Subud members of my generation, there's only sporadic latte hands in the next generation. And well, that's the way it is.
How about world congresses? Have you been to many world congresses?
Been to a few. I went to the Sydney Congress. I went to Anugraha, and I went to the recent one in Kalimantan. Yeah. I think the Anugraha Congress was amazing. All that hope, all that possibility. Yeah. Yeah. I would have burned the building down if I'd been the building manager. And started again, which is what the new owners recently have done. They demolished the building and built a new building in its place. What was special about Anugraha was the location and the garden, not the house, in my opinion.
It was a pretty ambitious adventure, huh?
Yeah. I mean, a Victorian house and you didn't have it properly surveyed. And every time you dug something up, there was another $1 million problem. Yeah.
Well, I don't really have many more questions. Do you have anything else you would like to talk about?
It's interesting. I mean, Subud numbers are falling around the world. We're all getting older and grayer. And I don't know where it's going to go. I've received about it. It's not anything for me to worry about. I've received about what I should do about it. It is for me to diligently do my learning. So that's it. That's all I do. I don't worry about it. We moved to the place where we are because it has a strong Subud group. That's really important for us to go and have a thriving social and Ladihanic community. That's really important.
Yeah.
Ladihani is my life. Without it, I would be without a rudder, without a compass. And I love the things that pop up unexpectedly, that would not come up without the Ladian. I love rubbing shoulders with people that I would never otherwise have rubbed shoulders with, people from different stratas, different cultures, different workplaces. And that diversity gives us wonderful insights into the human condition. I'm endlessly curious, if I see a pattern, I'm always wondering the why, so I'll ask the question, delve, observe. Yeah, the human condition is very interesting. Yeah. We're all different, we're all very interesting. And when I my therapy work with children, very often it was the mum who brought the child in to see me because she had a gut feel that something wasn't right, even though maybe all the specialists and the private schools and the husbands and whatever had said, don't worry, he'll grow out of it, she'll grow out of it. And I'd do an assessment and we'd get an understanding as to what I could do, what could be done to improve the sensory perception of the child. In other words, to make sense of the moment better. As you're doing now, you're sitting on a chair, you're listening to me, you're looking at my image, you're filtering out the background stuff. But for children that I used to see, all of that is overwhelming. If they're feeling uncomfortable on the seat, or they can't stop fidgeting, or there's a tab on their shirt that's irritating them, that engulfs them, that engulfs their attention. So if we can sort out how the sensory flows are managed and we can make sense of the moment, then they're much more likely to reach their potential. But the interesting thing is, often the fathers were very resistant. It wasn't the money. It often was the fact that they had the same issues and they'd learned to compensate. They'd learned to work bloody hard. They'd learned to work longer and harder than anybody else they knew. And they were buggered if that was all going to be undermined by something that I was going to offer their son. So I had the challenge in the sessions with the dad to find something that we had in common. And once I'd found that, it might be a love of wine, it might be a love of gardening, or whatever it was. That was the bridge between me and the father. Once I discovered that bridge, their opposition melted away. And it was easy. And I learned that for anybody that I meet, there's always a bridge that I can build with them, however obnoxious they appear, however oppositional they appear when we first meet. And that was a wonderful discovery. Yeah.
So are you retired now?
I think I'm retired, yeah. I think I finished my last client just before the Cali Congress. Yeah. And I'm loving it, actually. I can wear shirts like this. I can get up in the morning. I can sit on the deck and have a coffee till 8 in the morning and then decide what I'm going to do.
Yeah.
And you're still working.
I'm still working.
Yeah.
5 days a week.
Well, hopefully you love what you do.
I like what I do. Not sure if I love it, but I enjoy it. Yeah.
That's good. That's important. It's a big chunk of your life.
Yeah. Well, I think that's all I have. If you last chance.
Yeah, no, that was a privilege to be interviewed by you. Thank you so much for inviting me.
I appreciate you doing the interview. Thank you. I'm going to stop the recording now.
Bye-bye.